Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Ballpark. As always, I'm your host, Patrick Morin. Today, we have a great guest. We're going to be talking some Nationals baseball with Jack Morrison. Jack, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Pat. I'm excited to be on here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So, first of all, before we get into some specific things with your Nationals, because you're a Nationals fan, what have been your just overall thoughts on the season, as a whole?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the future in Washington. There's definitely a lot of young, bright talent, and keeping that core from the Juan Soto trade has been very important. Obviously, at the start of the year, they had that winning month in May, which was their first since the World Series run in 2019, which gives a lot of reason for optimism. And obviously, a down month in June led to the firings of Davey and Mike Rizzo. But I think there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Again, obviously, with the recent production of Drew Millis and CJ Stubbs, both at the catcher position. And I think that's one that a lot of teams that are rebuilding struggle to lock up long term. And I think the Nationals, with Keibert Ruiz as well, have that position set.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on it first. James Wood, that's kind of a big thing that, he's breaking out, and you have C.J. Abrams playing really well at shortstop, and then you have Mackenzie Gore looking like an ace type of arm, and that all came in the Juan Soto trade, and that's not even to mention like a Harlan Susana, who's consensus top 100 prospect. What are you kind of seeing from that package, and do you think that could be like the greatest package of all time in terms of like trades?
I think it's up there as one of the greatest trades of all time. Everybody hated the Nats for it, but I think it was a great idea because you take guys who were all in the top 100 prospects, four of them in Gore, Wood, Abrams, and um, Susanna Robert Hassel at the time, with Susanna just being out of the top 100. Now, of course, he is, and with four of those guys in the big leagues now, that's only going to help their development. And then they ended up re-signing Josh Bell, and Juan Soto is not even on the Padres anymore. So when you compare the two teams and how they fare now, I think the Nationals easily took the better part of that trade.
For sure. We can talk about like the other two specifically. I know that Gore, All Star first half, and then he hasn't had as good of a second half, but he's still coming into his own kind of late. It's just what happens with pitchers, and then a C.J. Abrams looking like a really good shortstop. Are you just happy with those two? Like, what's the good and the bad that you've seen?
I think they've definitely got a lot of upside. Abrams is really showcasing his glove, and I think having a veteran alongside him at third base with Paul DeYoung, I think that at the start of the season that especially helped him be a top tier fielder over there, especially for a shortstop. As well as Gore, obviously first pitcher to reach 100 strikeouts, definitely an all-star caliber first half. Just something that happens with young pitchers. They falter. I mean, you saw it a few years ago with Taiwan Walker going having a stellar first half and then terrible second. But it's just something that happens with young pitchers. And I think if the Nationals can continue to develop them, which they have in the past, I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, for sure. And Mackenzie Gore, we'll hit on the trade smoke before we move on from topics. I know that with 2.5 years of control at the deadline, there was potential that he could have been moved. Uh, what were your kind of thoughts on that? As a fan, and did you believe any of it?
Well, I mean, as a fan, you never want to see any star player leave, but especially Mackenzie Gore because a lot of people. I mean, he's fun. He's just fun to watch play baseball. He's got a power fastball and a power slider, and that's a pitch combo that was popularized in Washington. Obviously, Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg had that combination of pitches, and it's never something you want to see leave. And I'm thankful that the Nationals did not trade him. Um, but he did have a lot of trade value, and I'm honestly surprised there were not more offers for him.
Interesting. Lastly, James Wood, kind of the biggest story. He's really broken out. He had an incredible first half, home run derby appearance, All Star game, all that good stuff. He has just developed in a 100 percentile outcome pretty much. You know, how have you felt about that? Just seeing that come to fruition from a fan's standpoint.
Well, I don't think I could say enough good things about James Wood. He's great for the organization. I love what the Nats have done with him. He's been their project for a while, was number one in the organization for a while, and obviously when he made his big league debut, he did so um, alongside a lot of veterans and rookies alike. And he had obviously played last year, but really a huge breakout year this year. Can't say enough good things about him. Love watching him play baseball.
And he's super fun to watch. Um, Now we'll move on to the draft. This was a big draft for the Nationals. They had the number one overall pick. For me personally, I thought it was between Ethan Holiday and Cade Anderson. Thought, couldn't really go wrong with either guy. But instead, the Nationals went their own way because they fired, their manager and general manager, which we'll get to, and they took Eli Willits. I think the biggest thing was that he wasn't a Boras client, so a little bit easier to negotiate with. And, it was kind of a turn of events. So were you surprised at all with that?
Well, I mean, at the time, I certainly was. Taking a high school shortstop, number one overall, especially for a team that's rebuilding already with a lot of shortstops and infielders in the organization, it took me by surprise a bit. But then when I watched him play in low A and high A, I realized what this kid had, and that's a good bat and a good glove. And if he keeps producing at the level he is in high A, he will quickly rise through the minor leagues and be a force in the MLB.
No doubt. I mean, he was the youngest number one overall pick in history. And then, we saw the Nationals off of that pick, which was a massive underslot. They went, overslot in the second, third, fourth round, whatever you want to call it, with the rest of their draft class, and they were able to pay some guys with the savings. Just looking at the draft class as a whole, did you think, when it was all said and done, it made sense to go with Willits, especially considering what they did beyond that?
I mean, if you look at the entire draft and you just see the names and positions and what they paid, it did make sense. I feel like obviously having Willits sign when he did and having the other picks sign when they did, that I think helped the organization and the ownership a lot map out what they wanted to do. And I think the draft class as a whole, all of the 2025 draft class, it wasn't anything like we had seen a few years ago with the Skeens, Cruz, and Wyatt Langford, all that. But it was, I think, the way the Nationals played it was very well, and especially props to Mike DeBartolo, who was only in the general manager position for a week and still came up with a pretty good draft.
For sure. Were you surprised not to see Holiday and or Anderson go number one? I know I was. And you would think that a new front office, like you mentioned, would want to go with more of a slam dunk pick, but instead they kind of stuck to their guns and took their own guy. Did you respect that, or what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, before Rizzo was fired, they knew that Rizzo wanted Eli Willits, and they knew he was their guy. They looked at him a lot when he was in high school, and they knew they wanted to take him with that number one overall pick. They had no intentions to trade it, and I think DeBartolo just went with what Rizzo wanted because obviously having worked under him for so long, they think the same way, and he knows what he would have wanted. And I think ultimately it was a smart decision. Just took me by surprise, especially from a new GM.
Yeah, I think that'll segue into my next topic here. Davey Martinez, Mike Rizzo fired. That was kind of shocking that they did that the time that they did with the draft coming up. And, both led this team to a World Series in 2019. That was a magical run. And, now it's pretty much been torn down and they got to start from scratch. So, what was your reaction to that, seeing the not one but two guys go that were very important to the organization?
Well, I think the firing of Davey Martinez, I think that was warranted. Rizzo, I don't know about as much. I don't think it was such a great idea to fire him a week before the draft, nonetheless. But he had been a cornerstone of the Washington franchise for much longer than Martinez had. And I felt like if they were going to move on, they should have done so earlier. But I think the Davey firing, that should have been expected, because about a week before, uh, Martinez was asked in a press conference um, about his players and if that's a problem with leadership in the locker room or with the coaches. And he said, "No, that's all on the players. It's not my fault." And I feel like he kind of had it coming, if you will.
Yeah, certainly a controversial quote. I remember that. And then, with the outfield, you mentioned the Robert Hassel. You look at that picture; it's kind of crowded in a way. Like I feel like there are a lot of just similar guys in ability. You already have a James Wood, who's pretty much a lock. I would think Dylan Cruz is a lock in an outfield spot. But then you have, the Jacob Young and the Robert Hassels and a Dalen Lyle. You got a few guys fighting for outfield spots. Where do you kind of see that shaking out, and who do you think could, win some of those, internal battles?
Well, I mean, it depends a lot on what you need because you have, well, Dalen Lyle, I love watching him. He's a great contact hitter. Um, and obviously, you need that anywhere on a team. But you've also got that with C.J. Abrams and eventually with Brady House and Dylan Cruz. You've got a speedster like Jacob Young, and Cruz he can really run. So can Wood. So you've got a lot of different abilities and a lot of different play styles of these guys that are coming up through the organization, and it's really just a matter of what you need at the time. If you can build around your other guys, you can really with an outfield system as deep as the Nationals have, they can really do whatever they want, and I think that's a good thing for Miguel Cairo to have as a manager.
Now I'll circle back. That actually reminds me. Do you think that, some of the interim guys like a Di Bartolo and a Miguel Cairo, do you think that they'll keep those positions, or do you think the Nationals this offseason could try and, hire someone externally?
I think DeBartolo will stay. I'm not so sure about Cairo. I mean, he was only in the Washington organization for about a year and a half. Um, but I think there are a lot of good managerial options out there, and I don't know. I just don't know if Cairo has the experience. I mean, he did play 20 seasons in the MLB just as a coach. I mean, it's very different.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, we didn't really talk about pitching. I mean, I know we talked about Mackenzie Gore, but we look at what's after him. We have a Brad Lord in the fold, and you have a Jake Irvin, a Mitchell Parker, Cade Cavalli's come back healthy, which is really good to see, and probably some other arms that I'm missing, but the arms for the Nationals have kind of been lagging behind the bats. It feels like, with just the development standpoint and just the talent that the Nationals have had on the offensive side. Where are you kind of at on the pitching starting rotation wise and bullpen?
Well, I mean, when you're bringing up a young guy in the farm system, or you're drafting somebody in a draft, you're not drafting them to be a long relief pitcher. You're not drafting them to be a closer. You're drafting them as a starting pitcher. And we see this with Harlan Susana and all these other guys coming up through the farm system as starting pitchers. And I think I saw this stat the other day with Paul Skeens. If he had his bullpen allow less than 3 runs on all of his starts, he would be 31-3, which I think is astonishing to me. And obviously, the Nationals do not have a Paul Skeens on their roster, but it just goes to show how valuable a bullpen can be, especially when you have starting pitchers that have such a high ceiling. Like obviously Cavalli, when we've seen what he can do when he's healthy, and that's incredible things. But if you have a bullpen that's behind them that isn't going to help you, then what good are the starting pitchers?
Yeah, good point. And then overall, just how do you think this organization is going to move forward? I mean, it feels like this rebuild's been going on for quite a bit now. The Juan Soto trade was back in 2022. So they're just trying to, move forward, beef up the farm system, develop some young talent. And I know that you said you're optimistic with the direction of this organization. moving forward. If you care to dive deeper into that.
Yeah, I'm definitely optimistic and excited about the Washington Nationals moving forward. I think there are a lot of problems that the front office has to fix, and that's obviously who's going to be a leader in the locker room as a manager, and as a player. Obviously, we've seen that with James Wood being vocal both on the field and off the field as a producer. Um, but I think the Nationals, their pitching, it'll be solid in 5 years. They'll have a great rotation. Obviously, I talked about Cade Cavalli. We've seen what he can do, and I think the Nationals they've just got to wait, and that's not an easy thing for a fan base to do. Um, but I think if the Nationals have patience and they keep developing and working hard with these guys, they will be contenders in 5 to maybe 7 years.
Yeah. Um, I just have to ask, fun question. What do you think the Nationals lineup could look like in 5 years?
Oh boy. Um, well, I mean, obviously you're going to have James Wood at the 2 or 3, probably in left field. Dylan Cruz, I probably is going to be Dylan Cruz hitting second, honestly, in a few years in center field with Wood batting third. Um, but I like what Abrams is doing at the top spot. Obviously, we saw a few nights ago where on that very first pitch of the ball game in Cincinnati, he unloaded one 430 feet or something to right field. I love what he's doing at the leadoff spot. So definitely Abrams, Cruz, and Wood is going to be a central top three. As for the middle, I mean DeYoung's probably not going to be around for 5 years, but Dalen Lyle and Hassel can definitely be in the mix there as a designated hitter or in right. I think Lyle may be a bit better with the glove, so I would put him out in right. But I like where the Nationals are going, and they're going to have a lineup that's versatile and have all 5 tools up and down the lineup.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's an exciting future. I think there's a lot of good talent, and they just kind of have to keep progressing. Like you said, you got to be patient. So that's all I got on my end. Thank you so much. This was a great interview, just talking about the Nationals and what their future could look like. Jack, we thank you at Beyond the Ballpark for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Pat. Really enjoyed it and hope to be on here again sometime.
For sure. So that'll do it for the episode. Thank you to Jack for being a guest. We're hoping to get more guests on here. So yeah, everything you need is in the description. We'll see you next time.